again, and the Princess had been turned into a very old German governess. The Prince went home in a great hurry and an awful temper. The Princess was all right in a day or two. These are trying times, my dear." "I am so sorry for you," said Matilda, going on with the preserved ginger. "Well, you may be," said the miserable monarch, "but if I were to try to tell you all that that bird has brought on my poor kingdom, I should keep you up till long past your proper bedtime." "I don't mind," said Matilda kindly. "Do tell me some more." "Why," the King went on, growing now more agitated, "why, at one titter from that revolting bird, the long row of ancestors on my palace wall grew red-faced and vulgar. They began to drop their H's and to assert that their name was Smith from Clapham Junction." "How dreadful!" "And once," said the King in a whimper, "it laughed so loudly that 2 Sundays came together, and next Thursday got lost and went prowling away and hid itself on the other side of Christmas. And now," he said suddenly, "it's bedtime." "Must I go?" asked Matilda. "Yes, please," said the King. "I tell all strangers this tragic story because I always feel that perhaps some stranger might be clever enough to help me. You seem a very nice little girl. Do you think you are clever?" "It is very nice even to be asked if you are clever. Your Aunt Willoughby knows well enough that you are not. But kings do say nice things." Matilda was very pleased. "I don't think I am clever," she was saying quite honestly, when suddenly the sound of a hoarse laugh rang through the banqueting hall. Matilda put her hands to her head. "Oh dear," she cried, "I feel so different. Oh, wait a minute. Oh, whatever is it? Oh!" Then she was silent for a moment. Then she looked at the King and said, "I was wrong, your Majesty. I am clever, and I know it is not good for me to sit up late. Good night. Thank you so much for your nice party. In the morning I think I shall be clever enough to help you, unless the bird laughs me back into the other kind of Matilda." But in the morning Matilda's head felt strangely clear. Only when she came down to breakfast full of plans for helping the King, she found that the Cockatoucan must have laughed in a night, for the beautiful palace had turned into a butcher's shop, and the King, who was too wise to fight against fate, had tucked up his royal robes and was busy in the shop weighing out 6 ounces of the best mutton chops for a child with a basket. "I don't know how ever you can help me now," he said despairingly. "As long as the palace stays like this, it's no use trying to go on with being a king or anything. I can only try to be a good butcher. You shall keep the accounts, if you like, till that bird laughs me back into my palace again." So the King settled down to business, respected by all his subjects, who had all, since the coming of the Cockatoucan, had their little ups and downs. And Matilda kept the books and wrote out the bills, and really they were both rather happy. Pridmore, disguised as the automatic machine, stood in the shop and attracted many customers. They used to bring their children and make the poor innocents put their pennies in, and then read Pridmore's good advice. Some parents are so harsh. And the Princess sat in the back garden with the Cockatoucan, and Matilda played with her every afternoon. But one day, as the King was driving to another kingdom, the King of that kingdom looked out of one of his palace windows, and laughed as the King went by, and shouted, "Butcher!" The Butcher King did not mind this, because it was true, however rude. But when the other king called out, "What price cat's meat?" the King was very angry indeed, because the meat he sold was always of the best quality. When he told Matilda all about it, she said, "Send the army to crush him." So the King sent his army, and the enemy were crushed. The bird laughed the King back into his throne, and laughed away the butcher's shop just in time for His Majesty to proclaim a general holiday, and to organise a magnificent reception for the army. Matilda now helped the King to manage everything. She wonderfully enjoyed the new delightful feeling of being clever, so that she felt it was indeed too bad when the Cockatoucan laughed just as the reception was beautifully arranged. It laughed, and the general holiday was turned into an income tax. The magnificent reception changed itself to a royal reprimand, and the army itself suddenly became a discontented Sunday school treat, and had to be fed with buns, and brought home in breaks, crying. "Something must be done," said the King. "Well," said Matilda, "I've been thinking, if you will make me the Princess's governess, I'll see what I can do. I'm quite clever enough." "I must open Parliament to do that," said the King. "It's a constitutional change." So he hurried off down the road to open Parliament. But the bird put its head on one side and laughed at him as he went by. He hurried on, but his beautiful crown grew large and brassy, and was set with cheap glass in the worst possible taste. His robe turned from velvet and ermine to flannelette and rabbit's fur. His sceptre grew 20 feet long, and extremely awkward to carry. But he persevered, his royal blood was up. "No bird," said he, "shall keep me from my duty and my Parliament." But when he got there, he was so agitated that he could not remember which was the right key to open Parliament with, and in the end he hampered the lock, and so could not open Parliament at all, and members of Parliament went about making speeches in the roads, to the great hindrance of the traffic. The poor King went home and burst into tears. "Matilda," he said, "this is too much. You have always been a comfort to me. You stood by me when I was a butcher, you kept the books, you booked the orders, you ordered the stock. If you really are clever enough, now is the time to help me. If you won't, I'll give up the business. I'll leave off being a king. I'll go and be a butcher in the Camberwell New Road, and I will get another little girl to keep my books, not you." This decided Matilda. She said, "Very well, your Majesty, then give me leave to prowl at night. Perhaps I shall find out what makes the Cockatoucan laugh. If I can do that, we can take care he never gets it, whatever it is." "Ah," said the poor King, "if you could only do that." When Matilda went to bed that night, she did not go to sleep. She lay and waited till all the palace was quiet, and then she crept softly, pussily, mousily to the garden, where the Cockatoucan's cage was, and she hid behind a white rose bush, and looked and listened. Nothing happened till it was grey dawn, and then it was only the Cockatoucan who woke up. But when the sun was round and red over the palace roof, something came creeping, creeping, pussily, mousily out of the palace, and it looked like 1.5 yards of white tape creeping along, and it was the Princess herself. She came quietly up to the cage and squeezed herself between the bars. They were very narrow bars, but 1.5 yards of white tape can go through the bars of any bird cage I ever saw. And the Princess went up to the Cockatoucan and tickled him under his wings till he laughed aloud. Then, quick as thought, the Princess squeezed through the bars and was back in her room before the bird had finished laughing. Matilda went back to bed. Next day all the sparrows had turned into cart horses, and the roads were impassable. That day, when she went as usual to play with the Princess, Matilda said to her suddenly, "Princess, what makes you so thin?" The Princess caught Matilda's hand and pressed it with warmth. "Matilda," she said simply, "you have a noble heart. No one else has ever asked me that, though they tried to cure it. And I couldn't answer till I was asked, could I? It's a sad, a tragic tale, Matilda. I was once as fat as you are." "I'm not so very fat," said Matilda indignantly. "Well," said the Princess impatiently, "I was quite fat enough anyhow, and then I got thin." "But how?" "Because they would not let me have my favourite pudding every day." "What a shame," said Matilda. "And what is your favourite pudding?" "Bread and milk, of course, sprinkled with rose leaves and with pear drops in it." Of course Matilda went at once to the King, and while she was on her way the Cockatoucan happened to laugh. When she reached the King, he was in no condition for ordering dinner, for he had turned into a villa residence, replete with every modern improvement. Matilda only recognised him as he stood sadly in the park, by the crown that stuck crookedly on one of the chimney pots, and the border of ermine along the garden path. So she ordered the Princess's favourite pudding on her own responsibility, and the whole court had it every day for dinner, till there was no single courtier